Hello, I'm CJ Fairfield, Senior Associate Editor with CRN. I'm here monitoring the community-led live discussion of the ConnectWise ScreenConnect vulnerability. I'm here with Patrick Beggs, the CISO at ConnectWise, Jason Slagle with CNWR, Wes Spencer with Empath, Kyle Spooner with MSPGeek, and Kyle Hanslovan with Huntress. Thank you all for joining me today, gentlemen. And we're here to talk about the ScreenConnect vulnerabilities that reported a week ago or so. And Patrick, I want to start with you and Patrick Beggs, and what happened during, when you identified the vulnerabilities were first identified, what you did and took the steps to basically tell the community about them, what they should do to mitigate the vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and CJ, thank you for moderating, and thank you everyone else, my esteemed colleagues here, for joining as well. So I'll jump right into it. On February 13th, an independent researcher reported a potential ScreenConnect vulnerability using the ConnectWise vulnerability disclosure process. So we have what's called a VDP process where security researchers and alike can submit possible vulnerabilities to any and all of our products. And we took the expedited steps to vet the vulnerability disclosure report, and ConnectWise within 48 hours, we developed a patch, but also likewise we mitigated all of our cloud instances of ScreenConnect within that 48 hours, as well as that patch was being developed. Fast forward, and that was on February 16th. On February 19th, ConnectWise released an official patch for all of our on-premise partners. We posted that bulletin to the ConnectWise Trust Center and sent out partner comms urging and encouraging all partners to patch. We, of course, as folks have seen, we've leveraged many different social media and informational outlets to encourage folks to patch as well. February 19th, ConnectWise initiated contact with CISA as well, made them aware of the event, and they assisted with the CVE enumerations. On February 21st, because obviously at ConnectWise we're a security first mentality company, as an interim steps for on-premise partners, we took some extraordinary steps. On February 22nd, for all of our on-prem unpatched partner versions of ScreenConnect, we suspended those. So in a sense, we neutered them in a sense where they would not be exploited by these hackers. So that was very aggressive approach to this, but we had to, again, for folks that were not patching our on-premise instances, we had to take some extraordinary measures to ensure that further exploitation of those were not happening. And as folks have seen, we've been encouraging all of our on-prem partners to get patched to the latest version, which is 23.9.8 or later. So that's kind of the timeline of events. CJ, if you want, I can talk about what the details of the vulnerability, or one of our researcher partners here could explain that as well. So.
Right, and as I talk to the other ones, I want to remind all the viewers, if you have any questions, you can post them into the group chat, and we can address them at the end of the call for a Q&A session. Kyle Hanslovan, I want to return it to you and talk about the work Huntress had did. I know you guys put out like a 30-page report on Friday about all the exploits you're seeing in the wild. Talk about what you're seeing and what you're currently seeing as well.
Yeah, I think Patrick did a good job kicking it off, saying, look, a lot of things have had to happen very quick. Unfortunately, hackers also work on very fast feedback loops. And so what we're finding out is, as expected, like other vulnerabilities, those that don't patch, or to be very frank, sometimes folks don't even know what legacy infrastructure they might have laying around, are getting compromised. And what we mean by that are hackers are leveraging this exploit for the people who did not patch to do just about anything in the tradecraft, call it war chest. So CJ, to answer succinctly, yeah, we are seeing in the wild exploitation, and it ranges from the mundane of I'm looking to maintain long-term access, right? That's usually something that's a little less nefarious, but maybe setting up for future bad activity, straight into creating admin accounts, putting other remote access software in there, of course, deploying ransomware. There's nothing better than an immediate payout, to maybe less, kind of aggressive techniques of coin miners. So you are right. it is being exploited. Thankfully, I think the community's done a fairly good job at like getting the news out that, hey, this needs to be patched. That doesn't though mean that, you know, we can call this game over, because now you see the ripple effect. And so I won't hog the mic, but I think that ripple effect is something that I imagine all the people on here probably just need to warn about, probably need to hear. So back to you, CJ.
I want to talk, Kyle, about the healthcare provider hacks that we've been seeing and the Black Hat ransomware, and how there are a bunch of news outlets are connecting that to the ScreenConnect vulnerabilities. What is your response to that? What is your knowledge on that?
Yeah, you can imagine I don't always have insight to every organization. We did have about 1,600 ScreenConnect servers within our corpus of protected endpoints. The big one in the news is not directly related to us, but maybe getting to that news story. There's been a lot of conjecture, and that always bothers me. Like, attribution is hard to do. And some of the things that I have to ask are like timeline. For instance, I'm seeing a lot of conversation in the media of, hey, this could be a nation state adversary. So far, we have not seen, telltale signs of nation state adversaries. And that's, to be honest, expected. If you were somebody acting on that behalf, why wouldn't you want your tradecraft to look like somebody else's? Going back into the healthcare situation, I've also seen conjecture that says, look, with our threat intel, we have, maybe indicators that it could be related to ScreenConnect. And the reason that's so darn important to me is it focuses on that fog of war. Like, I remember the same day AT&T's outage, there was people claiming that could be related, completely separate, right, from everything that's out there. And CJ, for me, this is a good time to like avoid some of the sensationalism. Like, if it happened to happen, but like throwing out there speculation of where it might be happening takes away from the opportunity to actually educate on like what is happening, what is certainly happening, what can we do. So for me, I hope that's not like punting away from that question, because I just don't know. But a healthcare company, if they get hacked, they get hacked. Is it related to this? I don't know. For me, I would much rather focus on what is truly impactful. And for instance, rather than worrying about conjecture, is this nation state? Is it nation state using this exploit? Is it cyber criminals? I don't got time for that. I want to focus on the SMBs.
Jason Slagle, you're shaking your head there. Do you want to add anything to that?
He's got a great stoic look on him.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that means his internet connection at his fitness group is frozen up. But there he is. He's back, Jason.
I can fill in while Jason's coming in.
Okay, what did I miss? My data dropped.
Yeah, Jason, the simple question is, I was ranting a little bit on whether, hey, we've heard about healthcare firms. There's definitely some out there. There's obviously the big one that folks are asking. Any inside scoop? I know some folks are saying that's ScreenConnect related. Some people are saying nation state. Some people are saying related VPN. I just punted and said, I don't know. I'm focusing on what is really impactful. Do you happen to have any inside scoop?
I don't. I've been trying to get some, and the story has changed so many times at this point that I don't believe anything that I'm hearing from anybody, because first it was Lockbit, now it's Black Cat, right? First it was ScreenConnect, then I heard VPN pop. The timing seems really sus to me, unless it was done before the vulnerability, because this has gone on long enough. Clearly there's a ransomware incident, right? Clearly it's not just taking things offline to be super cautious about it. And the timing would be really short, because basically it was like 12 hours from POC to when Choice started reporting down. And to be able to get full ransomware and exfil on a network that size in that amount of time, I mean, that would be like groundbreakingly fast.
That's also what gives me pause, unless the threat actor had the exploit earlier. And maybe Patrick has more info, but for me, that's super sus, like to go from POC to actually deploying. It could happen.
Yeah. I mean, our internal reviews have yet to identify Change Healthcare as a ScreenConnect customer, and none of our extensive network managed service providers have come forward with any information regarding their association as Change Healthcare as a partner in that regard. So that's what we've looked at so far, and we continue trying to pull that thread, but that's what we know so far.
I want to go to Wes Spencer. Wes, you've been quiet this whole time. What are you seeing? What is your take on all this?
There's a lot of things to talk about here. First, just to tack onto that thread, and I'll go in a different direction too. This shows, the nature today of clear communication and how, even from a media perspective, one news outlet says perspective. They just quoted someone, a security sort of expert. It was at SANS, a large nonprofit security sort of think tank and standards producer, that, the correlation of ScreenConnect is there, therefore it must have been ScreenConnect as the cause. It's like, we don't know that. And then unfortunately, all these other news articles pick up. And I literally just a minute ago, right before the stream started, got a text from a CISO friend of mine who's at a household name company that you would all recognize, and said the same thing. I heard that, this whole healthcare incident that I'm reading about was related to ScreenConnect. I texted him back. I'm like, I don't think so. Just like Kyle said, we don't have enough data here yet. And it seems like we now have this is just run in an opposite direction that causes a lot of problems, because now we're dealing with aftermath that came in that may not even be related. This makes this world challenging for us when we get misinformation that comes in. And unfortunately, that's sort of the reality that we're at today. So I think I want to point to that. And then also I just want to point to one thing we mentioned just a couple of days ago on the cyber call that I was on is, I want to shift a little bit into, I think I'm proud of the work that ConnectWise has done in being very forthright and in working with the community on this, in producing what they know about it, in taking, I would say, evasive action in doing the right things to protect the MSP and to protect the end user. I think those are great things. And I'm proud to see our community sort of stand up in those ways and do some of the right things, even though the decisions may have been hard. So just want to throw that out there too, CJ, because that's really what stood out to me.
Yeah. Super big shout out for me to Jason Ferguson, who I've been lighting him up back and forth about this, and both him and Beggs have been super responsive.
Well, I want to talk about that. All last week, the community really jumped on this, from vendors to MSPs. I want to get your take on the community response that was overwhelming in helping others update their systems, update their servers, and really make sure everyone is secure. So who wants to jump in on that?
I'll take that. The first, I would second Wes's comment there. The reach that ConnectWise has put out with this has been absolutely fantastic, along with all the information and fixes that are available. But the community response is what I expect a community response around this to be, because at the end of the day, humans are social creatures. We enjoy hanging out with each other. We have friend groups inside of friend groups, and we want to help. It is just like a natural urge to help others. And communities, when there's a crisis situation and where there's a disaster, not saying that this is exactly that, but like when we all rally together to help each other out. And that is absolutely what has happened. As soon as the information was, publicized, it spread like wildfire, which is exactly what you want to do. It was saying, hey, tell everybody in your friend groups and your network, and put it on Reddit, put it in MSPGeek, the Discord communities that exist. Go through other vendors and let them know so that they can warn their partners, because ScreenConnect is a very loved tool in the community. It is possibly, if not one of the best systems to utilize, and we want to make sure that everyone's aware so that they can take action to fix it. Because at the end of the day, that's the goal. Let's fix the problem, tell everybody, and making sure that information is available and easily accessible from everybody is super important.
Now, this also got the attention of the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA. It added the one vulnerability to the known exploited vulnerability catalog. It also put out a note last week to MSPs and end users to apply mitigations or discontinue the use of the product by February 29th. I'd love to get your guys' response on that.
I mean, at the end of the day, Patrick didn't bring me on board here to be any sort of a shill. He brought me on board to be a objective, voice on this. And I'll say some of the things that maybe some folks don't want to hear. Like, if you cannot patch by February 29th, should you be running software like this? Should you be doing IT? I think, look, vulnerabilities happen. It definitely happens in our software, happens in any software. And I'm not here to smooth over the situation is perfect. It's not. There's all kinds of things that can be improved. That's what we're doing. But for me, CJ, like, I'm glad they actually came out and said it. I think we as this platform can ask the hard questions of like, if you can't patch, why are you not moving your stuff to the cloud? If you can't keep your inventory, and I know it's a finance reason, by the way. Hey, I don't want to pay a monthly subscription. I've heard it firsthand from partners, the financial situations. But I see the ramifications of when people don't do this, when they don't take quick actions. I'm seeing businesses having hard times, not being able to run payroll, not being able to do logistics. Like, this happens. And I was really happy, CJ, to just flat out see them say, like, patch or not. But I think that this is the platform where we can actually challenge and say, like, if you're not honestly at that point able to do it, let's be real, you're probably already compromised anyways, if you're exposed to the internet, at least. So,
Absolutely.
You are.
what are other people
100%.
thinking? I mean, I know I kicked that off a little salty, but for me, like, there's a big problem if you can't get this done by tomorrow.
Yeah. And patching isn't enough. Go ahead, Patrick.
No, to jump on that, Kyle. I mean, there's an era of responsibility, right? And especially for, the MSP partners and customers, right, of what they own and operate. It is crucial, right? We have critical infrastructure, implications at hand here, in a sense of, and also people's livelihoods. Kyle, the Kyles, you guys can speak to that as well from the MSP side of the house. But I'll quickly say, there's patching is one thing, but we really need to emphasize folks to run hardening guides. And I know we worked with Mandiant and they published a hardening guide, which has been incredibly beneficial. And we've been using that internally to help the folks that have been calling in, but also running your playbooks and doing your scans. It's not just patching, as I'm sure everyone here can lament to, that it's important. So,
I mean, so considering all the people who are on this panel at the moment, I am the least security expert here. First to admit that, and happy to. But I understand that where my limits reach and what I need to have someone else be responsible for. And I think it's important to understand that patching isn't enough, that you have to put in, application firewalls and segment to IP ranges and whitelisting and all that great stuff. And I think it's important that we educate more on what you need to do aside from patching, because patching is just not enough anymore. It's not. You can't get away with setting auto updates on and moving on, right? You have to do a whole lot more VLAN segmenting, all this crazy stuff that I barely understand to do to make sure that you're safe. Because they're constantly trying, and they're just throwing the net out a lot of times, not even specifically related to this issue, but just throwing out things, hoping it sticks.
So I'll speak up here and offer the Jason view on this. So in 2024, should we have to be relying on a third-party hardening guide? Should the products not come out of the box hardened, and should the vendor not be providing the hardening guide? So I think there's an opportunity there for improvement for sure.
Yeah, Jason, I just threw in chat real quick about, like, all of us have responsibility, right? From the vendors, right, of the community, the vendors of the software, but also the people managing, and as a personal responsibility, meaning just sharing. And I think that's a good question. I mean, Patrick, I'm not going to serve anything up to you that's too spicy, but on my end, I kind of look at this so similar to the Exchange situation of, like, should we still allow Exchange to be on-prem? And obviously Microsoft probably has $1 bajillion worth of on-prem licenses. So them, like, end-of-lifing something like that is not easy, but obviously you see Microsoft pushing to the cloud. I'm asking very similar questions of, like, should folks not really consider that if they can't patch, can't manage, should it not be in the cloud? And maybe likewise, Patrick, maybe one of the questions is, is there an opportunity for, like, ConnectWise to tee up a managed version of this where it's still on-prem, but you all have the ability to go in and push security? Maybe it still has to have a subscription. You can't do anything for somebody who doesn't have a subscription, but
I can speak to, obviously from the security perspective of that, Kyle, and I appreciate that perspective and teeing that up. As I can speak to you guys don't know, for incident response, for event management, speed kills, it is essential, right? And for our cloud partners that we assist, right, it's, as we said, we updated them seamlessly. But when we do, when we do assist our partners on a daily basis, not, excluding this, right? The fact that if they're a cloud partner, the telemetry, the logs, and everything that we can see within minutes versus if they're a prem customer, the manual process of doing that review. Again, speed really matters in these types of events. As Kyle, Wes, you guys can relate to that. It is so important. That you really get a handle on it within the first couple of hours, if not the first day. So, stopping short of saying everybody should be in the cloud, I can speak from a security practitioner's perspective that it really, really helps to have that visibility. So, Wes, I think we were talking briefly about this last week, but your take on that for sure.
Well, I where my brain's going on this a bit, and this may be a little more esoteric than we want to jump into, but have we actually, as security practitioners, done more damage to this on ourselves? Let me give an example of this. When we start saying things like, oh, look, I can't use cloud because it has to be in FedGov certified and I have to self-host, and that's the mandate. Have we actually introduced more risk than we've mitigated, especially when a lot of those compliance requirements are focused on data confidentiality, not necessarily anything else? And we're just trying to keep, Russian bad guys from stealing, or Chinese threat actors from stealing our sensitive data. And so the focus has all been, well, let me keep this in my premise where I can secure it better than some cloud I don't trust. Well, how well has that worked out for us? I think that question needs to be asked, especially to federal regulators and those that are, working through, government contracts and all of this, right? So I want to throw that out there that is a potential. Sometimes I wonder if compliance in some ways does more damage than good.
I'd like to devil's advocate that. You are at that point putting your trust in the vendor, right? And there should be some level of trust in the vendor. But that vendor is generally much larger and has much more chance of human error causing a problem than a smaller entity, right? There's always going to be chance for risk, but I'm not sure that at some level there's always going to be do I trust how they've built their cloud, right? Because how they built it and how it's integrated also matters. I don't know that I could trust every vendor, even if there's security vendor. Like, I love Huntress, but I'd always have questions regardless of, what I'm doing, to make sure that I can feel like the way they answer those questions, that I can trust what they're giving me, right? There's the trust but verify. We have to make sure that what they're doing makes sense and is still protective, because there's always going to be that human error that is just much more prevalent in a larger vendor.
And we've seen plenty of instances where the vendors aren't, like, there was a rumor flying around last night about another vendor and a big potential problem that I think turned out to be nothing. But a lot of the vendors that host on-prem, especially if it's on-prem first, you basically end up, it's not separate instances. You end up with this giant single instance data store with all the data centrally managed. And we call that a giant target. Right. And so at that point, you're really relying on the vendor they're the only ones that can stop it. And this whole process breaks down there a little bit, right? Like JCDC or CISA, like they won't issue something on the KEV unless there's a CVE, and you can't get a CVE for a product that's only cloud, right? So there's a whole bunch of other compensating controls. You end up with these vulnerabilities that you basically will never find out existed, because the vendor hides them because there's no on-prem version of them. So there's no reason to inform the public, which is both good and bad.
Yeah, there's some lessons learned, I think, on the public-private partnership side of the house. And I think I could speak to that, being, Kyle knows, one of the founders of the precursor to CISA, before it was CISA. There's on all sides, from a community, from practitioners, from software companies, that we can take some lessons learned on more proactive ways to address this and what's going to happen, and who knows what next, right? In the sense of the world we live in. I think there's some good reflections there for sure. So.
I wanted to go back to the on-cloud versus on-prem server question. Patrick, is ConnectWise, because of all this, is ConnectWise going to get rid of on-premise licenses and force the cloud version?
No. So we, as we've stated before, we can't force folks. We're not going to. We're respecting folks. what they feel is best suited for their environments and their customers. So not to dance around it, but we're not, to my knowledge, there's no plans to discontinue that, right? Again, I will speak from a security perspective, just the opportunities and the advantages of the cloud side versus the prem side, but we respect companies' rights to choose what is best for them. So.
I want to talk to the MSPs on the call, Jason and Kyle Spooner. I want to get your perspective from an MSP and the impact this has on the industry.
This has, I mean, I'm lucky enough to be deeply involved in the community. I consider the community a passion of mine. So I was alerted very early, and I followed my processes and alerted those who have the ability to patch. And we patched basically immediately with no regard to what's in that patch. Just to make sure that we were protected when the CVE or when it became super public, right? Because it's a race against time to make sure that you're protecting yourself to do that. So those who aren't embedded in communities and those who don't have that, there's communities everywhere. There's Facebook, there's HTG Evolve, there's Taylor Business Group, there's tons of just in multiple levels of an MSP and even in an IT sector, right? CompTIA, there's just massive amounts of communities, and spreading the information, even if they already have it in some section, you want to publicize that as much as possible. But the far reaching of that has been super helpful for at least the communities I'm a part of, making sure that you blast everybody so that they're aware to fix it, right? Because the impact I haven't seen, but I have seen reports of problems, like someone didn't patch, so their license was cut off, and someone thought they may have been exposed, and reach out to support. Go reach out to ConnectWise. We can't help you at that point. Shut it off. Disconnect it if it's on-prem, but you're going to have to reach out to ConnectWise to start the process. But that's as long as the information is being put out and pushed out, that's really the only benefit on-prem MSPs can have.
And I think we got to watch out not being in an echo chamber. Let's be real. The people who are listening to this live stream are like part of the community. As a result, we're reaching you. But even as of last night, representing MSP voices, I had partners that were telling me I had not seen the news. I had not seen Reddit. I'm not part of a peer group. I'm not part of, MSPGeek. I didn't know. And that blew my mind. Like, I felt like there hasn't been a larger, shouting from the hilltops. But I think that's where I go with the personal side, that we need to pull more people into these communities, because how else do they know? It reminds me of the old Telegram game of if you're not personally relaying stuff like that, you just can't assume. Jason, I know the question was also thrown at you as being an MSP, so I don't want to take any more of your voice.
I mean, I view this challenge as the single biggest threat to my business, right? I view the threat of regulation or the threat of reputational damage to the industry as a whole due to immature providers that either don't care, don't listen, or aren't involved as being the thing that will end up sinking the industry. I personally called most of my competitors that had on-prem versions that weren't patched as of Wednesday morning, right? It's because the reputational damage in our local area, if they did not patch, would be huge, right? No one will trust MSPs if all the MSPs in the area get popped. Kyle's right. We do have a bit of an echo chamber, but we're not like the cool kids club that you can't join. We welcome everybody with open arms.
Please
come be part of our echo chamber. We have cookies. They're actually pretty good. We want more people involved. We want the ability to have these conversations, right? Some of the Facebook groups I'm hanging out in, right? There's some really naive viewpoints there of I don't, my license expired 6 years ago, so how can I block this without upgrading my license and things like that. And it's those sorts of immature attitudes that I think will end up damaging the industry widespread.
And Patrick, are you still seeing some on-prem servers that are not updated?
Yes. So we're still seeing. It's the numbers have gotten better. Much better since the beginning of this, obviously. But yeah, there are still on-prem versions that are unpatched. Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
I mean, again, the mitigation step that I had highlighted before about the license revocation, the license suspension, right? But there are instances that that are behind firewalls, right? That the visibility just isn't there, right? That's a frustrating part for us as well. But not just us, just folks at large need to understand the implications of not patching.
Yeah, I think it's still, and I'm going to say it, I'm going to get yelled at later, I'm sure. The last data I saw from somebody in the industry, Cody, that's tracking is, I believe, still more than 50% of servers we can reach on the internet are not patched.
Yeah, we could have a separate debate on that one, but I think that unfortunately some of the sources are diverse in nature.
So,
yeah.
Coming from the perspective of someone who isn't deeply in the security space and doesn't immediately jump to all the security ramifications of doing something, what are some things that I can do as an MSP for my on-prem applications and on-prem systems to better harden myself?
I'm going to tee Kyle up. I want to get y'all's perspective, and then I think we could probably crowdsource the rest of the answer.
So as a guy who lives in detection and response, I'll always start with, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But what stinks is even in a zero trust world, this is your trusted tool set doing bad things. So when the hacker, for instance, gets into the web app and runs something, it doesn't show as shady.exe, right? It shows as ScreenConnect that spawns. So this to me is one of those cases where sometimes, taking a healthcare analogy, nothing you take, no vitamin is going to prevent cancer. Sometimes cancer creeps up into your life. And what's important is finding it early and taking care of it when it's early stage, not when it's, your terminal. So where I'm going with this is I'm not going to plug any one vendor, but if you're not doing something to quickly catch and respond, really like abnormal behavior, and some of that is just because of other people on this call here had shared with us things had gone down and we had responded. And there was there's healthcare research, there's security research, all of those things together has led to minimizing the impact of this incident. So I hope that's not too morbid for everybody, but sometimes incidents happen. And I just don't think it's realistic to say we can prevent each one of them. With that said, in other circumstances, if you had truly looking at the behavior, so when exploits do happen, but it's contained because this application isn't allowed to do this behavior because that behavior is anomalous, that I think can apply in most cases. Unfortunately, ScreenConnect is built to allow administrators to do everything they need to do, which often shares everything a hacker needs to do as well. Does anybody have maybe a contrasting opinion on that? Am I being too direct?
I have a direct point though. Like in 2024, if you're still applying a carte blanche exception in your AV rules for tools like ScreenConnect or Automate or your RMM and not doing point level specific scripts exceptions when you need to, you are doing it wrong. Because if you have, it used to be in a lot of the vendors' hardening guides or a lot of the vendors' recommended guides that you basically whitelist AV on the scripts directory, or your whitelist AV for anything run from the ScreenConnect parent process. And we can't do that anymore because most of these things now rely on behavior detection. They rely on a bunch of other heuristics that you blind them from. So if you have that rule in place, then all of your protections are essentially rendered moot at that point, right? So it's more work for sure to do it on a case-by-case basis, but in something like this, it could be the difference between 100% pop and 1 or 2 systems before something catches on.
Yeah, I was going to mention the same thing about their users. Giving all your users admin access is extremely poor practice.
In this one, it wouldn't matter because it makes
but in general,
So I think what we're saying here, I think that's important, is just to boil a little bit of what all three of you just said. The security poverty line has risen, right? There's sort of been, to use economic terms, inflation has come in. The way you acted as the minimum security standards as an MSP 5-6 years ago is not acceptable today. And if you're going to continue to be an MSP and you're going to continue to operate in the best interest of your client, and you're going to continue to want to avoid negligence, what you've done in the past is not sufficient for today. And so what does that mean for us? Well, I think that means a lot of things, right? We've seen the federal government kind of peek into this a little bit too at the National White House cybersecurity strategy. And they said the onus is on larger vendors and liability should be pushed upward. So I think we need to hear more from the larger vendors. What are we doing? What are best practices? What are mitigations that we should put in place? What are the expectations of you as an MSP, as an operator in this? But also for MSPs, what's the minimum acceptable standard? Are you framework aligned in what you're doing? If you've had your head in the sand, to Kyle's point a while back of not knowing that this even happened a week after it occurred, you might need to rethink a little bit more of how you're operating from a minimum standard. So that I think it's important for us to understand the game has changed underfoot for us, and we've got to keep up.
CJ, we talked last year at IT Nation Secure, and I'm trying to jog your memory a little bit on that conversation, because it leads to, we used an economic term, but maybe I'll leverage my military background a little bit. The cyber arms race has exponentially gotten worse over the past 2 years, right? And I think we lamented about that, talking about the IT Nation Secure, but especially with, I mean, I'm not going to do the AI plug, but things are getting a lot harder from the detection standpoint, right? And if, to Kyle, to Kyle's point, that if you don't have visibility, at your farthest reach, right, you're going to have some challenges for sure.
So Patrick, what is ConnectWise's plan to, catch it, to make sure this doesn't happen in the future? What do you, I remember this was kind of caught by Huntress. How are you going to do to make sure this doesn't happen in the future? Obviously, nothing is 100% secure, but what are lessons learned from ConnectWise?
So we're a software company, right? We make software, and software has vulnerabilities, right? So to clarify that this vulnerability was not detectable by any automated or static code. It was a bug. It was a flaw, right? So we're going to continue. I'm very proud of what we've put in place in the past couple of years here at ConnectWise with our product security initiatives. We're in line with our SDLC is very mature, right? We sign off on releases. We have product security and response teams that are embedded within the different products that have subject matter experts that know those products. We have a threat and vulnerability management program. We have red teaming, threat hunting, you name it. So, but the lessons learned really is to say, hey, let's hold ourselves accountable. Let's take it to the next level. And how can we ensure that A, we did this right from a response standpoint, but B, we're doing it right from, like I said, baking security in, as any company should be doing, not just ConnectWise. You should always be reflecting on how you could better fuse security into all of the aspects of how your company operates. So
that's really going full circle, right? We just had Wes saying MSPs, we cannot operate the same way we did 5 years ago. And I think, Patrick, what you just said is even software vendors can't operate the same way we did 5 years ago. It's just, it cuts both ways.
Yep. And we're taking, we are, again, I say security first, and it's not just a tagline, right? I think folks that know me, my bar's pretty high when it comes to this stuff. So, and sometimes we don't always agree, but folks understand the importance of it. So that's been important as well.
Patrick, you made a comment earlier about being able to find this or not being able to find this. I will be first to say that one, if you see how this bug works, it seems so obvious. At the same time, I can see the other side of the coin where I might not have used the word you couldn't find this for review, but this is such a nuanced, hard to find bug. I am not surprised that something like this has lived for as long as it did in the code base, just because you don't know what you don't know. Going back to healthcare, right? You don't know a single mole that you can't see on your back is actually something that will be a much bigger problem until you have somebody else spot it out for you. But gosh, I think that's the hard reality that maybe the community has to consider, that even when you're doing all the right things, you can still end up sick.
When we were going through this, Kyle, go ahead.
There's no bulletproof answer. Absolutely. I think one of the comments on LinkedIn said, there's always an if. It's not an if, it's a when. Situation, and that is absolutely important. The mindset on how you approach security, it needs to be a win, and lowering the risk tolerances that you may have, to make sure that you're segmenting things properly and your proper permissions are set. You don't connect your ticketing system and give them full admin access because they requested it. I think it's extremely important to make sure that we're following those.
Yeah, I think this drives to more than just that, right? Like, I think at this point, a good SDLC with static code analysis and good code review is table stakes, right? But I was on the call with John and Caleb when we were going through this, and the line of code, it's one line of code that's broken. And that single line of code, we looked at it several times and didn't think it was the problem because it looks very normal and it looks totally like what you would expect. And it's a side effect of the way HTTP works that allows this to happen, right? So I think that the vendors need to evolve and not just rely on static analysis and not just rely on code review and start to do things like fuzzing all known endpoints and things like that, because I'm guessing the security researcher either accidentally triggered this or triggered it with some sort of fuzzing tool.
You want to explain what fuzzing is to those who don't know?
Oh yeah, it's just throwing random stuff at it and seeing what happens, right? So like, I have a ton of tools in our tool. I mean, any Kali box has a ton of tools that can just throw random stuff on the end of a URL to see if anything interesting happens. And in this case, eventually it would have gotten to a slash and we would have known what's going on.
I like to reference this as, thinking from an MSP, like a ticket. Someone opens a ticket to resolve a problem, right? You may have solved that similar problem, but it may not be the same. Like you could look at it and it's something else caused the same issue, right? It's not going to be the same thing over and over again. You have to make sure that this is something that just can occur.
And to my fellow software, the software vendors out there, if you don't have a wrangle, if you don't know have a single source of truth for your static and dynamic code repositories, right? Problems are going to happen. So, put some calories into that and make sure you have the right tools that are capable of reviewing and analyzing those as compilation does occur versus, again, baking it in versus, continuously having to upgrade and patch.
I want to talk about the perspective and all this. I talked with John Hammond from Huntress for a bunch of stories, and I quote him saying we're watching the world burn. Others have likened this to the same.
Makes sense.
There's other people out there that are saying it's nothing of that magnitude. Patrick, actually had you quoted saying you're not seeing that as compared to Kaseya or SolarWinds. Wes, I want to get your take on this. I'm seeing people saying it's not that big of a deal, and others saying, like John Hammond saying, it's watching the world burn. What is your take on the varying degrees of perspective on this?
What a great question, CJ, because let's play. Let me say a couple things on this. Let's play the part of an average CEO that was paying attention to watching a little bit of the news articles, and then they didn't see any things they care about, which are mass ransomware shutting down their business. They didn't see hundreds of organizations overnight being hit by something. So they can look at this, and as security practitioners, if we don't watch kind of how we use our language correctly, we can be a little bit of the boy who cried wolf. We can be a little bit of this is a mega colossal event. And then they look at it and say, well, I think you're just scare tactics here because I didn't see anything that affected me. That said, this could have been that. And that's what I think the security researchers are trying to point to, is that had this not been responsibly disclosed and had a bad guy discovered this and kept this quiet until they were ready to operationalize and do something really nasty, it could have been totally different.
And I want to get that word out. Again, we had an independent researcher, bring this to us, and we've had really good success with that in the past. I mean, Kyle at Huntress, we actually worked with you guys, right? A year and a half ago, and it was a great partnership. But again, you can't say it enough. Sometimes to your analogy, sometimes you can be too close to your things, right? You need a third party review on how you do things and what is in your environment. That's important as well. So.
I mean, I will go, and perception, right, is reality. If I could say two observations that I've seen that have had misnomers during this is a lot of people underestimating the one-to-many relationship between one ScreenConnect server and how many businesses have been impacted. Just sharing data on our end, where we more or less hot fixed our client base so it couldn't be exploited. We've still seen 150 companies on our end having some post exploitation. And oddly enough, it's not from their managed ScreenConnect servers. It's I left somebody's legacy, or somebody gave me remote third-party support and left their agent on there. And so I can see in some places of like, if you're not aware of that one-to-many, or just how much, like, I don't know, I think about like as my own life, I'm not the most organized person. And to say that you have like perfect hygiene and you know every app in your environment, BS. I have billions of endpoints. So I actually am finding many of these cases where businesses are being compromised. They patched, they did everything as a service provider. It's the small businesses who didn't know, or even the IT department who didn't know that, oh crap, once upon a time, another MSP took care of this and they left their software and I didn't catch it, or vice versa of I just needed remote help desk support for this one single healthcare appliance and they used this software to remote in and help me, and for some reason didn't free up that license. That debt is, I think, what's causing some of that. So I can see both sides of, yes, thankfully we are not seeing the ripple, but I think some people aren't understanding the nuance of like, it's still happening.
What about the instances like how many times have one of us had a family member say, hey, can you help me resolve this, and we've had to figure out a tool to remote in, we're just pick something that works, right? And now it's 6 years later, they need you to do it again, and you got to update like 6 versions of it because it's been so long since you've had to do it. Like, that's a super common occurrence.
Well, we actually took the step of, we yanked the ScreenConnect agent off of our entire fleet if it wasn't ours, right? So if I couldn't identify where it came from, we ripped it out to stop that exact problem. But I mean, more to the point, I think that we're all really quick to say, oh my God, we saved the day and came in here. But there are tons of compromised instances, and there are potentially compromised instances where the person was compromised. They saw the advisory, they upgraded ScreenConnect, they fixed their users.xml file, so now it's working, and they think they're good. And they secretly have a web shell or Cobalt Strike or some sort of other remote access tool still present on that ScreenConnect instance. I talked to a partner the other day that came in, I won't name him, it came in via the CompTIA ERT, and he was in that exact boat. Like, he's not running AV for whatever reason, wasn't running AV, even running AV on his ScreenConnect instance. And we told him to nuke and pave. Like, don't even trust that instance ever again. Just knock it completely over and start up a new one. And I think that this won't be, we avoided a mass casualty event here, right? That's what we avoided. We avoided like a nuclear bomb going off and wiping out the entire industry. But what we maybe haven't avoided is a sniper up in the hills slowly taking out groups over the next months, like we saw with Exchange, because I think that's what you'll see. Is that over time, this will be a lot like Proxy Shell, where you see initial access brokers got into these instances. The people then patched them, which was very common in the Exchange world. And then months later, those initial access brokers sold access off to somebody else, and then it was acted on.
Can I ask a question? Like, so let's say this happened, right? What can I look for in my ScreenConnect instance that would be a red flag for me?
I mean, this is probably an opportunity where many people have blogged. Huntress has blogged. Patrick, this might be a great opportunity on your end. I know your team has actively done a ton of like incident response and helping. What's the official ConnectWise if someone needs that help, wants that help? Like, this isn't the place for me to go plug my stuff. So maybe that's best for you.
No, and we have I can't say enough about, how quickly Mandiant has worked with us and asked for comment on their hardening guide. And I know there's similar guides, there's similar communications and resources out there. That's just one of them. And I know we have that up on our trust site, or should be up on our trust site. There's a lot of great information. To Jason's point, again, if you're not running AV, if you don't have a basic EDR, you're blind in a sense. You can be blind in a sense. But again, it goes back to running any playbooks. If you have somebody managing your security, encourage them to not just patch, right? Is to have them take a look at any abnormalities of services and processes that are running that shouldn't be running at given times or at all, right? I think to your question, Kyle, stay tuned. We're going to put out some further more technical details and some reflections of some of the commonalities that we've seen through our incident response efforts with the partners that have contacted us, and we've walked through. We've seen, and we've learned a lot of really great stuff, but also some of it was pretty basic. We're like, this is here you go type of deal. So.
I think this is what I like most about this webinar that we're putting on is this isn't a after action report where we're all high-fiving, we're all done. We're saying we are still very much in the weeds. We are constantly learning, and there's going to be some like both great lessons learned. There's going to be some embarrassing lessons learned, but I hope the community as a whole pulls that away of like, this is about constantly getting better, right? That 1% iterative improvement each day. So
I would also advise maybe if you're not sure, if you have an issue with your ScreenConnect server or other system that you may feel maybe have issues, turn it off from the internet until you can verify.
We'll call Hanslovan.
Yeah,
That's a great segment of this question. Is I asked Patrick earlier in the call about lessons learned, but I'd love to hear from the 4 other guys on the call. But what are your lessons learned that you guys have seen, and talk to me about what you can, tell the MSP community about this.
Folks, don't mind me going first. On my end, it's each of these incidents expose the unknown unknowns. I had no clue overnight. And we're talking about ScreenConnect today, but let's not mistake. There are many other vendors where this exact same scenario can happen here. And we're having to take a step back, CJ, and say, all right, this was great. We got to respond to a real world incident. We're continuing to respond. But a lot of my question is, how is this not going to happen tomorrow with another vendor, and how would we do better? And places that are crushing me, maybe even CJ, me giving you some like personal things, like CRN going out and providing heads up and news, helping. Like I thought I had a big megaphone. I am rocked to my core to know I'm still getting phone calls as of like last night and this morning of I'm just hearing about this. So for me, I think we've got to figure out how do we communicate better. We've got to figure out like how can we actually like on my end. I asked Patrick, hey dude, is there time for ConnectWise to maybe like try to go out to Black Hat and share some of their lessons learned this year of like on main stage? It might be past, but CJ, like we have to be able to like not, if we don't learn from history, right, we're doomed to repeat it. I just can't emphasize it. It's going to happen again. Slightly different product, slightly different vendor, but I just hope that we learn from this and keep this in it.
Count me in, Kyle. If we're reaching out, we're doing further calls to patrons. I'd love to have a candid, and we're going to be at Right a Boon next week, Wes, and hopefully we can have a healthy dialogue as well. Even though we're still things are ongoing, right? But I know that's going to be a topic at that conference next week. So.
Yeah, I don't want to rob the mic from anybody else, but let's think of the other incidents. Why is there not more vendors hitting the main stage? And I understand liability, I get it. But where are the other vendors who have had incidents like this saying, here's the lessons where we effed up and let's be transparent? I mean, they do this in healthcare. They do this in military operations that fail. There's plenty of other analogies. Why aren't we doing very similar? And sometimes it's just easier to, we don't want to put ourselves through the mud, but I actually think it brings more credibility and trust if you're
absolutely.
Able to. So I don't know. I just hope that's where we go with this incident. We take as much as possible and we try to learn from it.
If there is a problem, if there is something like that's the very first, like what's the 12 steps, right? The first step is admitting there was an issue, right? You have to, that starts restoring the trust in the problem. Like stuff happens, right? My car breaks down. Windows adds Copilot without my permission. There's so much things that just happen in life that someone made a decision on, and it comes back to bite them. Maybe there's no consequences. Maybe it's just a fluke, right? Being open and honest about why you didn't catch something or why you made this mistake, and saying this is what I've done to correct it, is a lot of people don't do that, and it's very frustrating from an MSP, from a leadership perspective, from a business perspective. And it's very frustrating to see that not as many vendors have been open and upfront with their issues.
I think part of the reason for that is the petrifying fear of liability, right? Legal counsel comes in and says, you can't talk about that. You can't admit that. You can't say those things. That introduces us to all kinds of loads of liability. Interestingly, in Florida, there is a bill that is it's currently in committee and looks like it may get passed. And basically, I forget the name of the bill, but I can go look it up if anyone cares. But basically what it's doing is it's introducing in safe harbor for organizations that have followed a mature cybersecurity framework. And they give a whole list of them, of CIS, NIST, 800, 53, 171, a whole laundry list of them, ISO 27001, all of these. And the idea from it is we're giving you safe harbor from tort, and meaning that we're going to give you the ability for you not to be sued for liability in certain areas. And I think things like that can be healthy to incentivize organizations to not only say now because we have safe harbor, because we can prove that we've demonstrated a good, mature security approach. Now we actually are free to talk about some of these things, and we can actually learn. I'd love to see more of those things even happen at a legislative level that can open up and introduce the capability of removing that overarching threat of liability on top.
There's a side effect of revealing where the process failed or where the situation failed, is that other people have similar processes, right? No one reinvents the wheel when we build a business and when we build software, right? It's all the same. You write code, you publish it. There's steps in between, obviously, but someone may have had the same issue, and they may be, you know what, this is important. Maybe I should go double check this and reevaluate what I'm doing, because how often have you reevaluated your business processes? When's the last time you looked at them? I can probably guarantee you it's been a very long time and to evolve that. And it's important to double check stuff like that.
Yeah, to kind of tag onto what Kyle said there, right? It's like having these lessons learned publicly allows others to also learn from them. Right. So other companies can, say, oh, man, yeah, like to his point, we can look at that. And I can guarantee we now have security researchers and probably threat actors fuzzing other tools like this, and they will find other bugs, very similar bugs. And because we've exposed this class of attack, we can only hope that the security researchers find it and report it through responsible channels to try to push this class of bug out in many other products, right? If you gate that, you could make some argument that, well, it'll be harder for the threat actors to find it, but it also makes it harder for other companies to fix it. And I think that there are enough of us interested and enough of us pushing this forward that we can win if we all work together.
I think it's a great ending, Jason. Is we actually have, if there's any questions, we have a Q&A, chat. You can ask questions to any of the guys here. If not, any updates will be in the ConnectWise advisory page, and this recording will live on all ConnectWise social pages. I want to thank Patrick, Jason, Kyle 1 and Kyle 2, as they said, and Wes chatting with me today. And stay tuned. If there's anything else, check out the ConnectWise advisory page.
Likewise, Patrick, huge thanks for orchestrating this. CJ, thanks for not pulling punches and asking spicy questions.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for joining this. This was great. And, I foresee hopefully at some point more of this in the future. So great.
Do we have questions? Somebody say questions.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a question.
So great question, Steve. So there is an opportunity to upgrade to upgrade your ScreenConnect version, even if it's not an active support agreement. So absolutely, there's some resources out there on our trust site on the ConnectWise blog that walks you through that. So you do not have to be an active subscriber to get patched. So go check that out. Great question.
Can I chime in there and say that if you are at this point running an internet facing service without vendor support and software maintenance, you are negligent and you should go out of business. I will flat out say that.
That's a lot. I'm not going to disagree with the statement, but
Jason burning the world down, but you probably are compromised. And it would probably be a hard argument in court not to say, like, he might not be wrong.
That's honestly, that's probably not the only software or system that you're running that's the same situation.
100%. Yeah. It boggles my mind. I'm not willing to pay this money for this tool that literally makes my business work, and now it's going to get compromised.
Yeah, you saying the quiet things out loud. It's good. Ooh, that's a good question. Because the answer is no, in my opinion.
No,
as a
the answer is
non-developer,
no. And as a matter of fact,
individual.
AI will make that bug 100% of the time.
It probably referenced it from someone else's code base.
Yeah, somebody probably copy and pasted from Stack Overflow, and that's where we are.
AI can find bug classes. Let's not completely tromp on AI. Like, it will find stuff that negligent software developers. Would it find this bug? This is a very nuanced bug. Let's not give AI superpowers, but let's also not like.
All right.
Were there questions coming in from the audience? I'll give it a second.
All right.
Yeah. Again, any updates on the ConnectWise Advisory Board, you can watch this recorded on all ConnectWise social pages. Thank you for tuning in, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, DJ. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yep.